The bitter taste of betrayal filled my mouth as I stared at the photographs spread across our mahogany dining table. The same table where we'd celebrated 3 anniversaries, where Catherine had once looked into my eyes and promised forever, while the Chicago winter howled against our windows like a reflection of the storm raging inside me. A tempest of rage and heartbreak that threatened to drown every memory we'd built together in our upscale Lincoln Park home. I'm Alex Carter, successful auto shop owner, former military special operations, a man who built everything with his own 2 hands: the business, the house, the perfect life, including the marriage that Catherine seemed so eager to throw away for hotel room encounters with a man 5 years my junior. That Tuesday evening in November, when she finally gathered the courage to ask the question that had been hanging in the air between us for weeks, I was prepared. I'd been meticulously prepared for 27 days, 17 hours, and approximately 9 minutes. The exact time since I'd confirmed what my gut had been screaming at me for months. "Why don't you want me anymore, Alex?" she asked, her voice trembling as she stood in our kitchen, still wearing her tailored charcoal work suit, makeup flawlessly applied, blonde hair falling in perfect waves around her shoulders. Her manicured hands clutched the kitchen counter, knuckles white with tension. I slowly raised my eyes from the imported Italian pasta I'd been pretending to enjoy. The fork in my hand felt suddenly heavy, like a weapon I was choosing not to use. I placed it deliberately beside my plate, the soft clink against porcelain almost deafening in the silence between us. Then I smiled. Not a warm smile. Not the smile that had once made her melt against me on our first date at Giordano's Pizza 6 years ago. This was the smile that acknowledged the end of something once precious, cold, detached, final. Because you gave away what was mine. Her face, that beautiful face that had once been the first and last thing I wanted to see every day. Drained of color, the transformation was almost artistic, like watching life seep from a painting in real time. Her perfectly lined lips parted in shock, her blue eyes widening with the horrifying realization that I knew everything. But I wasn't finished, not by a long shot. The showdown I'd been choreographing in my head for weeks was just beginning, and Catherine was about to discover that the man she'd betrayed wasn't the kind who would break down and beg her to stay. I was the kind who would walk away with his dignity intact and leave her drowning in the consequences of her choices. It started 97 days earlier, on a rain-soaked Thursday evening when Catherine had been working late at Morrison & Hayes, the advertising firm where she'd recently been promoted to creative director. Nothing unusual about that. She'd always been ambitious, driven, determined to climb every rung of the corporate ladder. I'd supported that ambition, adjusted dinner times, rescheduled anniversary plans, even postponed our conversations about starting a family, all to accommodate her career aspirations. But then came the text notification I glimpsed lighting up her phone while she showered. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Same place, same time, still thinking about last night." The message preview disappeared as quickly as it appeared, but those words burned themselves into my retinas, setting fire to every assumption about our marriage. I didn't confront her immediately. Military special operations training teaches you patience, strategy, reconnaissance. So I watched, waited, gathered intelligence, not because I was afraid of what I'd find, but because when I finally confronted her, I wanted my case to be ironclad, devastating, final. The evidence accumulated with each passing day, like toxic snow piling on our Chicago doorstep. Receipts from restaurants I'd never been to, tucked carelessly in her purse. Hotel charges on a credit card statement she thought I didn't monitor. The lingerie hidden at the back of her drawer, sophisticated black lace she never wore for me anymore. Phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. Weekend work emergencies that required her immediate presence at the office. Thomas Reeves, that was his name, 34 to my 39, creative director at Lennox Partners, a rival firm. The classic story: they met at an advertising conference in New York while I was expanding my auto repair business to a second location in Evanston. While I was working 16-hour days, securing financing, hiring staff, setting up equipment, all so we could have the life she said she wanted, the dream house, the luxury vacations, eventually the private school for the children we'd planned to have, She was discovering a connection with someone who apparently understood her creative soul better than her mechanic husband ever could. I hired a private investigator, Raymond Dalton, a former police detective who specialized in matrimonial cases. Not because I needed more proof, but because I needed documentation from a professional, something that would stand up in court if necessary. Ray delivered spectacularly, high-resolution photographs of them entering the Waldorf Astoria downtown, time-stamped records of their meetings, even recordings of conversations in public places that made my stomach churn. All perfectly legal, all perfectly damning. "You sure you want to see all this?" Ray had asked when he handed me the sealed envelope at a coffee shop 3 blocks from my business. His eyes held the weariness of someone who'd seen too many marriages disintegrate. "Some clients prefer the summary without the details." "I need to see everything," I replied, sliding an envelope of cash across the table, "no matter how much it hurts." And it did hurt. Each photograph felt like a physical blow. Catherine laughing over wine, touching Thomas's hand, entering the hotel elevator with her body angled toward his. The timestamps revealed a pattern spanning 3 months, including an evening when I'd been home with food poisoning and she'd claimed to be at a client dinner. Throughout it all, I maintained the appearance of normalcy with the discipline of a soldier behind enemy lines. Kissed her goodbye in the mornings, the taste of betrayal bitter on my lips. Asked about her day over dinners she frequently missed. Slept beside her at night, though I kept my distance, unable to bear the thought that another man's hands had traced the curves I once believed belonged only to me. She noticed my withdrawal, of course. "Are you okay? You seem distracted lately," she'd say, her hand reaching for mine across our kitchen island, the diamond on her finger catching the light. The ring I'd saved for 2 years to buy while still building my business from nothing. "Just business stress," I'd reply, allowing just enough truth to make the lie believable. "The new location is more demanding than I anticipated. Growing pains." She'd nod sympathetically, perhaps relieved I wasn't asking questions, then check her phone, her thumb scrolling through messages I now knew weren't about advertising campaigns or client deadlines. Sometimes in unguarded moments, I'd catch her watching me with an expression that might have been guilt. But then she'd smile and ask if I wanted to watch a movie or suggest weekend plans with our friends, the Andersons or the Millers, couples who had no idea our marriage was a hollow shell propped up by routine and my unwillingness to confront the truth until I was completely ready. The hardest days were when she'd initiate intimacy, reaching for me in the darkness of our bedroom. I found reasons to avoid her touch. Work fatigue, early morning meetings, a pulled muscle from the gym. Each excuse distanced us further, but the alternative, making love to a woman who had given herself to someone else, felt like accepting her betrayal. My pride wouldn't allow it, even as my body ached for the connection we once shared. On her birthday in September, I presented her with diamond earrings I'd purchased months earlier, before suspicion had crept into our marriage. She cried when she opened the velvet box, tears I once would have interpreted as joy but now recognized as guilt. That night, she wore the earrings to dinner at Alinea, one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants, where we pretended to be the perfect couple while an invisible chasm widened between us. "You've seemed so far away lately," she said over dessert, a complex creation of chocolate and cherries that cost more than most people's daily wages. "I miss us." The irony of her statement nearly made me laugh. Instead, I reached across the table and took her hand, wondering if Thomas had held the same hand earlier that week. "I'm right here, Amanchoni," I said, the lie smooth on my tongue. "Just busy with the expansion. It will settle down soon." She seemed to accept this, relief softening her features. We finished dinner, went home, and she fell asleep curled against me for the first time in weeks. I lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of her betrayal pressing against my chest with each breath. The confrontation wasn't what she expected. There was no shouting, no breaking dishes, no dramatic accusations that would give the neighbors something to gossip about. That's what most people expect from a mechanic with my built-in background. Explosive anger, primitive reactions, loss of control. But that's not who I am, not who the military trained me to be. Instead, I prepared a folder. Leather-bound, embossed with the Carter Auto Repair logo, the kind you'd use for an important business presentation. In a way, that's exactly what it was. The business of ending our marriage with the same methodical approach I'd used to build my company. That night, when she came home late again with the familiar excuses about client emergencies and deadline pressures, I was waiting in our living room. Lights dimmed, just the table lamp illuminating the space between us. The folder sat on the coffee table like a ticking bomb about to detonate our shared life. "Alex, why are you sitting in the dark?" Her voice carried a note of unease as she set her designer handbag on the entryway table, shrugging off the camel hair coat I'd given her last Christmas. I gestured to the armchair across from me, the one she preferred during our Sunday morning coffee rituals. "Sit down, Catherine. We need to talk." She hesitated, assessing my expression, then complied, crossing her legs nervously, smoothing her skirt over her knees with trembling fingers. "What's going on? You're scaring me." 3 years ago, I began, my voice steady despite the thundering of my heart. "You made vows to me in front of 142 people. Do you remember what those vows were?" She swallowed hard, the slender column of her throat constricting. "Of course I do. What is this about?" "To love, honor, and cherish, to forsake all others." I pushed the folder toward her with a single finger, like sliding a contract across a negotiation table. "Open it." Her hand shook as she reached for it, manicured nails scraping against the leather. The first page was our wedding photo, her in ivory lace, me in my charcoal suit, both smiling beneath an archway of roses at the botanical gardens, looking like we had forever stretched before us. She turned the page and gasped, a sound like all the air had been punched from her lungs. There they were, photographs, text message printouts, hotel receipts, timestamps. 3 months of betrayal laid out in chronological order, each transgression documented with the precision of a criminal investigation. I'd even included a timeline, marking the days she was with Thomas against the days she claimed to be working late, the pattern undeniable in its regularity. "Alex, I can explain." Her voice was barely a whisper, panic rising in her eyes as she flipped through the damning evidence. "No," I cut her off, not unkindly but firmly, the way you'd correct someone working under your supervision. "You can't. And more importantly, you don't need to. The facts speak for themselves." Tears streamed down her face, ruining the makeup that had been perfect just minutes before, mascara creating dark rivers down her cheeks. "Please, it didn't mean anything. It was a mistake, a stupid mistake. Thomas was it was just physical. It didn't mean anything emotionally." "A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk on the way home," I replied, leaning forward, hands clasped between my knees. "What you did was make thousands of consecutive choices. Every text, every lie, every hotel room, every time you looked me in the eye and said you were working late. Those weren't mistakes, Catherine. They were decisions." She fell to her knees then, the designer skirt pulling around her on our Persian rug, crawling toward me, reaching for my hands with desperate fingers. I stood up, moving away from her grasp, unable to bear her touch when it had been so freely given to someone else. "I love you," she sobbed. Makeup completely ruined now, the polished executive reduced to a pleading wreck on our living room floor. "Please, Alex, we can fix this. We can go to counseling. I'll quit my job. I'll never see him again. I'll do anything. Please don't throw away 3 years over one stupid mistake." I looked down at her, this woman I once thought I couldn't live without, this person who had been the center of my world, and felt nothing but a dull ache where passion used to burn. The love hadn't disappeared entirely. That was the cruelest part. It was still there, wounded and bleeding beneath layers of betrayal and broken trust. "The problem isn't that I don't believe you're sorry," I said, my voice softer now. "The problem is I don't want to fix this. I don't want to be married to someone I can't trust. Someone who could do this to me while I was building a future for us." I walked to the hall closet and retrieved my packed duffel bag, 3 changes of clothes, toiletries, my grandfather's pocket watch, and important documents. Everything else could wait. "I've transferred half our savings to your personal account. The house is paid off. You can stay here or sell it. Your choice. My lawyer will contact yours tomorrow with divorce papers. You're leaving me." Her voice was small, disbelieving, as if she'd expected me to rage then forgive. Just like that? Without even trying to work things out? No, Catherine. You left me weeks ago. You just didn't have the courage to tell me to my face. I headed for the door, car keys heavy in my pocket, but her voice stopped me as my hand touched the knob. Where will you go? The question contained equal parts concern and panic, as if my destination might somehow determine the finality of my departure. I turned back one last time, taking in the sight of her, disheveled, tear-stained, kneeling on the floor of the home we decorated together, surrounded by evidence of her betrayal. Despite everything, a part of me wanted to remember her like this. Not out of cruelty, but as a reminder of why I needed to leave. Somewhere I can breathe again. I spent that first night in the presidential suite of the Four Seasons downtown, an extravagance that seemed appropriate for the occasion. If my marriage was ending, it would end with me sleeping on 1,000-thread-count sheets with a view of Lake Michigan, not on some friend's lumpy sofa listening to sympathetic platitudes. I stared at the ceiling for hours, waiting for the breakdown that never came. The pain was there, deep and throbbing like a wound that hadn't been properly cleaned, but alongside it was something unexpected: relief. The weight of suspicion had been lifted. No more wondering, no more pretending, no more feeling like a fool in my own home. The next morning I called Jackson Martinez, my business partner for the past 7 years, the man who'd helped me turn a two-bay garage into one of Chicago's most respected auto repair businesses. I need some time. Can you handle both locations for a few weeks? My voice sounded steadier than I expected as I gazed out at the lake, watching early morning sailboats cut through the water. Sure, man. Everything okay? Jackson's concern was evident even through the phone. We weren't just business partners. He was the closest thing to family I had since my parents' deaths 5 years earlier. It will be, when us answered, and surprisingly, I meant it. Somehow, despite the wreckage of my personal life, I could see a future where this pain was just a memory. Catherine and I are done. I'm filing for divorce. Silence stretched between us, then a low whistle. Damn, I knew something was off, but I didn't realize it was that bad. What happened? The details don't matter. It's over. I wasn't ready to share the humiliation of being cheated on, not even with Jackson. I just need some time to figure out next steps. Take all the time you need. The shops are running smoothly. Rodriguez has really stepped up as manager at the Evanston location. There was a pause. You need anything else? Place to stay? Someone to get drunk with? I appreciate it, but no. I've got a room for now. I'll check in tomorrow about the Westlake account. After ending the call, I ordered room service, a breakfast I barely tasted, and made the next necessary call to Samuel Weiss, my attorney. Samuel had handled the business contracts when I expanded. Now he'd oversee the dissolution of my marriage. Catherine called 37 times that day. I know the exact number because each missed call registered on my phone like the ticking of a morbid clock marking the death of our relationship. I didn't answer. She left voicemails that progressed from tearful apologies to angry accusations. How dare I just walk out? How dare I not give her a chance to explain? As if there was anything to explain that the photographs hadn't already made painfully clear. By evening, her tactics changed. Text messages began arriving, each more desperate than the last. Please come home. We need to talk about this. I made a horrible mistake. Please don't throw everything away without talking. At least tell me where you are. I'm worried about you. That last one almost made me laugh. Worried about me now, after months of betrayal? The concern felt less like love and more like fear. Fear of consequences, fear of judgment from friends and family, fear of a future different from the one she'd planned. Samuel was efficient and dispassionate, exactly what I needed in the midst of emotional chaos. We met for lunch at his downtown office the following day, reviewing my options with the same thoroughness we'd once used to evaluate potential business locations. Given the evidence, he said, examining the photographs with clinical detachment, we can push for a favorable settlement. Illinois is a no-fault state technically, but judges aren't robots. Infidelity matters, especially with documentation this comprehensive. I nodded but found myself saying, I don't want to punish her. I just want out. Clean, fair, and quick. Samuel raised a skeptical eyebrow. setting down the folder. Most clients in your position want blood. They want the cheating spouse to suffer financially. I've seen enough blood in Afghanistan to last a lifetime. My voice was quiet but firm. I built my business from nothing once. I can do it again if necessary. Just make it fair and make it quick. Within days, Catherine's initial shock gave way to desperation. She showed up at the original Carter Auto Repair location on North Halsted, eyes red-rimmed, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. So unlike her usual polished appearance, she clutched a bouquet of blue irises, my favorite flowers, the ones my mother used to grow in our backyard in Wisconsin before cancer took her too soon. Jackson intercepted her at the customer counter. Through the window of my office, I watched their interaction, her pleading gestures, his sympathetic but firm stance. "Boss doesn't want to see you," he told her, not unkindly. Jackson had sisters. He knew how to be gentle even when delivering unwelcome news. "Please, Jackson, 5 minutes. I need to talk to him." Her voice carried through the garage, causing several mechanics to glance up from their work. "Not my call, Catherine. He's made his position clear. I suggest you talk to your lawyer." Jackson's loyalty was unwavering, one of many reasons our partnership had thrived. I watched from my office window as my oldest friend gently turned my wife away. The woman who'd shared my bed for 3 years, who knew my nightmares from the war, who'd held me through the grief of losing both parents, now reduced to begging for moments of my time. There should have been satisfaction in the role reversal, her seeking my attention after months of giving hers to another man. But I felt only emptiness. Her next move was to enlist our friends. Calls from concerned voices started pouring in, a chorus of confusion and mediation attempts. "She's a mess, Alex." This from Ryan Anderson, my college roommate, now a successful attorney with a corner office in the same building as Catherine's firm. "She says it was just a one-time thing. The photographs spanning 3 months suggest otherwise," I replied calmly, watching Chicago's skyline from my hotel window. "People make mistakes." Ryan's voice held the reasonable tone he probably used in courtroom negotiations. 3 years of marriage is worth at least trying to save. They do make mistakes, and now we're both living with hers. I softened my tone. "I appreciate your concern, Ryan, but my decision is final." My sister Jennifer was more direct when she called from Seattle, where she'd built a new life after her own failed marriage. "You're really doing this? No counseling? No second chances? That's not like you, Alex. You've always been the one who fixes things." "Would you give a second chance?" I challenged, knowing her history. Her silence was answer enough. Jen had walked out on her own husband 5 years earlier after discovering his affair with his administrative assistant. She hadn't looked back either. "That's different," she finally said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Is it? Because from where I'm standing, betrayal feels pretty universal." The most surprising call came from Catherine's mother, Eleanor Williams. We'd always gotten along well. She appreciated my stability, the security I provided her daughter after Catherine's reckless college years, with a string of unreliable boyfriends. "Alex," her voice was gentle on the phone, carrying the slight southern accent from her Tennessee upbringing, "I'm not calling to change your mind." "You're not?" I couldn't hide my surprise as I paced the hotel room that had become my temporary home. "No," she sighed heavily, the sound of a mother carrying her child's mistakes. "Catherine told me everything. I raised her better than this. Her father and I are deeply disappointed doesn't begin to cover it." We talked for nearly an hour, not about reconciliation, but about disappointment, about how the people we love most can become strangers right before our eyes, about the sanctity of vows and the consequences of breaking them. "What will you do now?" she asked finally, after sharing her own grief over her daughter's choices. "Start over somewhere new." The plan had been forming in my mind, taking shape with each passing day. There's nothing left for me in Chicago but reminders. "You're a good man, Alex." I'm sorry she couldn't see what she had in you. Coming from my soon-to-be ex-mother-in-law, those words hit harder than any of Catherine's tears or pleas. Eleanor's validation confirmed what I already knew in my heart. I deserved better than what Catherine had given me. 2 weeks after I walked out, I put the second location of my auto shop up for sale. Jackson was stunned when I called him to my hotel suite and laid out my plans over whiskey and room service steaks. You're not serious, he protested, setting down his glass with enough force to slosh amber liquid onto the polished table. We just got the Evanston location profitable. The expansion was your dream. Dreams change, I explained, cutting into my steak with methodical precision. I need a clean break. Too many memories here. Too many connections to a life I thought I had. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly, accepting the inevitable. Where will you go? Denver. My buddy Marcus Reynolds has been trying to get me to partner with him on a custom motorcycle shop for years. High-end restorations, custom builds, the kind of detailed work I used to love before management took over my days. Just like that, new city, new business, new life. Jackson's expression reflected equal parts admiration and concern. What about your share of Carter Auto? I want to sell to you, I said simply. You've earned it. You know the business inside out. I'll accept payments over 5 years, no interest. The Evanston location can go on the market. It should fetch enough for a decent down payment on the Denver venture. Jackson's eyes widened. Alex, that's too generous. The business is worth. I know exactly what it's worth, I interrupted. I also know what your friendship is worth. This feels right, Jackson. You've earned your shot at ownership. We hammered out details until past midnight, the logistics of separation from both my business and my marriage taking shape with each hour. By the time Jackson left, swaying slightly from the whiskey, the foundation for my new life had been laid. The sale went through quickly. The Evanston location was prime real estate, and our reputation solid enough to attract multiple offers. My share was enough to buy into Marcus's business and put a down payment on a small house in the Denver suburbs, a modern 3-bedroom with mountain views, and enough garage space for the restoration projects I planned to take on personally. Catherine found out about my plans from Jackson's wife, Sophia. They belong to the same book club, and news travels fast in social circles, especially news as dramatic as a divorce followed by a cross-country move. She appeared at my hotel room that night, pounding on the door until I opened it, bracing myself for another emotional confrontation. You're moving to Denver, she demanded, pushing past me into the room, the scent of her perfume, Chanel No. 5, the one I'd given her on our first anniversary, stirring unwelcome memories. You weren't even going to tell me? I closed the door quietly, maintaining the composure that had become my armor. I didn't think I needed to share, my plans with you anymore. She whirled to face me, eyes blazing with indignation beneath smudged makeup. 3 years of marriage and you can just walk away? Start a new life like I never existed? You made your choice, I said simply, hands in my pockets to keep from reaching for her despite everything. Now I'm making mine. I made a mistake, she shouted, her composure finally breaking completely, the corporate executive facade crumbling to reveal the desperate woman beneath. A terrible, awful mistake that I'll regret for the rest of my life. Doesn't that mean anything to you? I sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly tired beyond words, the weight of the past weeks pressing down on my shoulders. It means you're human, Catherine. It means you're flawed, like everyone else. But it doesn't mean I have to live with those flaws. So that's it? You're the perfect husband who never made a mistake? Her voice was bitter now, seeking to wound. I made plenty, but I never broke my vows. I looked her in the eye, unflinching. I never gave away what wasn't mine to give. She crumpled then, the fight leaving her body in a visible wave as she slid down against the wall until she sat on the plush hotel carpet, hugging her knees like a child. I still love you, she whispered, sounding lost. No, I replied softly, the truth painful but necessary. You love the idea of me, the security, the stability. If you loved me, you wouldn't have been able to look me in the eye day after day while sleeping with someone else. We sat in silence for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, the tension between us gradually shifting from anger to resignation. Finally, she stood up, smoothed her skirt with shaking hands, and wiped her tears with the back of her wrist. When do you leave? Friday. She nodded, accepting what she couldn't change, then reached into her designer purse and pulled out a small velvet box. I found this in your desk drawer when I was looking for... I don't know what I was looking for. Answers, maybe. She placed it on the desk near the window. You should have it. I knew without opening it, my grandmother's sapphire ring, the one I'd planned to give Catherine on our 5th anniversary, upgrading from the modest diamond I'd been able to afford when we got engaged. A family heirloom that had survived 2 world wars and the Great Depression, only to become another casualty of our broken marriage. After she left, I opened the box, the familiar creak of the hinge revealing the deep blue stone nestled against faded velvet. The sapphire caught the hotel room light, twinkling with possibilities that would never materialize now. I snapped it shut and packed it with the rest of my belongings. Friday couldn't come soon enough. Denver greeted me with crystalline mountain air and a fresh start, the Rockies standing sentinel on the horizon like guardians of possibility. Marcus's motorcycle shop, Second Gear, was everything he'd promised: busy, respected, with a loyal clientele of riders who appreciated quality craftsmanship over mass production. "Man, I still can't believe you're really here," Marcus grinned, showing me around the shop floor on my first day. Motorcycles in various stages of restoration gleamed under industrial lighting, from vintage Harley-Davidsons to rare European models. "When you called from Chicago, I thought you were just talking to hear yourself think." "Sometimes talk is all we need to push us into action," I replied, already feeling at home among the tools and engine parts, the familiar sense of oil and metal a strange comfort. Besides, there's nothing like a failed marriage to inspire a change of scenery. I threw myself into work with the dedication of a man outrunning his memories. The custom bike business was different from standard auto repair, more creative, more detail-oriented, more satisfying in a fundamental way. I relearned the intricacies of motorcycle engines, built relationships with clients who trusted me with their prized possessions, established new routines that didn't include checking my phone for messages from Catherine. The small house I bought in Lakewood needed renovations: outdated kitchen, carpeted bathrooms, a deck that threatened to collapse under the slightest weight. The projects gave my hands something purposeful to do when my mind threatened to wander back to Chicago and the life I'd abandoned there. Each wall I painted, each tile I laid, each piece of furniture I built represented another step away from betrayal and towards something of my own creation. Nights were the hardest. The silence of an empty house echoed with questions I couldn't answer, doubts that crept in with the mountain darkness. Had there been signs I missed? Was I so consumed with building our future that I neglected our present? Catherine's betrayal was unforgivable, but was I completely blameless in the slow unraveling of our connection? I started running in the mornings, punishing miles up and down mountain trails until my lungs burned and my legs trembled beneath me. Physical pain was easier to manage than emotional wounds, more immediate, more comprehensible, more responsive to direct action. 5 miles became 7, then 10, then 15 on weekends, my body growing leaner and stronger as winter gave way to spring in the Colorado foothills. 6 weeks after my move, the divorce papers arrived via certified mail. Catherine had signed without contesting anything, accepting the division of assets exactly as my lawyer had proposed. Her attorney attached a handwritten note. "Mrs. Carter wanted you to know she waives any right to alimony or additional property division beyond what you've already arranged. She asks only that you find happiness elsewhere." It should have felt like victory, the clean break I'd wanted, the freedom to move forward without legal entanglements or financial disputes. Instead, it felt hollow, like winning a game no one actually wanted to play, receiving a trophy engraved with loss rather than achievement. That night, I finally let myself break down completely, alone in my half-renovated house, surrounded by unpacked boxes and unfamiliar shadows. I cried for the life I'd planned and lost, for the children we talked about having, a boy with Catherine's blue eyes and my stubborn chin, a girl with her mother's creativity and her father's determination, for the woman I thought Catherine was, before betrayal revealed a stranger wearing my wife's face. The next morning, I got up at dawn, ran 10 miles through a spring snowstorm, showered under water hot enough to turn my skin red, and went to work on a 1969 Triumph Bonneville that needed complete restoration. One day at a time, one foot in front of the other, one broken part replaced with something rebuilt and stronger. That was the only way forward. 3 months into my new life, a familiar face appeared at Second Gear. Ryan Anderson, my college roommate, stood awkwardly among the motorcycles in his tailored suit and Italian loafers, looking out of place amid the tools and engine parts. "Surprise," he said lamely when I approached, wiping my greasy hands on a shop rag. "What are you doing in Denver?" I asked, genuinely confused by his presence. Ryan was Chicago to his bones, a third-generation resident who claimed the city's pizza ran in his veins. "Conference at the convention center. Thought I'd stop by, see how you're doing." He glanced around the shop with appreciative eyes. "Looks like you landed on your feet." I led him to the small office in the back, offering him coffee from our ancient machine that produced liquid only technically qualifying as caffeinated. "I'm doing okay. How's Chicago?" He hesitated, and I knew immediately he had news about Catherine. Part of me wanted to stop him, to preserve the fragile peace I'd built in my new life. But the larger part needed to know, like pressing on a healing wound to check its progress. "She's not good, Alex. Lost her job last month." This surprised me. Catherine had always been dedicated, ambitious, skilled at navigating office politics. What happened? Started missing client meetings, showing up unprepared. The firm carried her for a while, given her past performance, but the final straw was when she had a breakdown during a presentation to Bristol Myers. Started crying, couldn't stop, had to be escorted out. They let her go the next day. Ryan sipped his coffee, grimacing at the bitter taste. "She's staying with her parents now, back in her childhood bedroom at 40. I absorbed this information, searching for the satisfaction I might have expected to feel at her downfall. Finding none, only a complicated mixture of concern and vindication that left a sour taste in my mouth. "Thomas dumped her, you know, right after you left. Apparently, he wasn't looking for anything serious." Ryan studied me over the rim of his cup. "Turns out he had a fiancée in New York the whole time. Catherine was just a Chicago diversion." "The classic story," I murmured, thinking of how predictable it all seemed in retrospect. The younger man, the secret rendezvous, the inevitable discard when consequences appeared. "She made a huge mistake." "We all make mistakes," I said quietly, surprising myself with the lack of bitterness in my voice. "Some just have bigger consequences than others." Ryan stayed for dinner, catching me up on mutual friends, carefully steering clear of more Catherine news unless I asked directly. We reminisced about college days at Northwestern, motorcycle road trips before responsibilities claimed our free time, basketball games where we cheered until we lost our voices. For a few hours it felt like old times, before marriages and careers and betrayals complicated everything. Before he left for his hotel, he handed me an envelope, cream-colored and heavy with expensive stationery. "She asked me to give you this, said it doesn't need a response, but she needed you to have it." I took it reluctantly. "I don't know if I want to read it." "That's your choice. I promised I'd deliver it, that's all." He clapped me on the shoulder, an old gesture of solidarity from our college days. "You look good, Alex. Better than I expected." "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Someone broken, I guess. That's what Catherine is." After he left, I stared at the envelope for hours, turning it over in my hands, feeling the weight of the pages inside. The handwriting on the front, my name in Catherine's elegant script, brought back memories of birthday cards, love notes left in my toolbox, shopping lists on our refrigerator, fragments of a shared life now dismantled. Finally, around midnight, I opened it, the sound of tearing paper unnaturally loud in my quiet house. Catherine's handwriting was as neat as ever, though I noticed places where the ink had blurred, presumably from tears falling onto the page as she wrote, "Alex, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect you to read this. But I need to put these words somewhere, and you're the only person who should hear them. What I did was unforgivable. Not just the affair, but the lying, the betrayal of everything we built together. There's no excuse, no explanation that could possibly justify it. I've spent every day since you left trying to understand why I did it. The best I can come up with is that I was selfish, insecure, and took for granted the best thing that ever happened to me. Thomas meant nothing. He was attention when I felt invisible, validation when I felt worthless. That's not a justification. It's the pathetic truth of a woman who had everything and still wanted more." You deserved better. You deserved loyalty, honesty, and love that didn't waver. I failed to give you any of those things. I lost my job. I'm sure Ryan told you. I couldn't focus, couldn't stop thinking about what I'd thrown away. My parents have been kind enough to take me in, while I try to put myself back together. It's humbling at 36 to be living in your childhood bedroom. I don't want you back, not because I don't love you, but because you deserve someone whole, someone who would never hurt you the way I did. I just wanted you to know that you were never the problem. It was me, all me. Be happy, Alex. Build a good life. Know that somewhere in Chicago, I'm trying to become the kind of person who would have deserved you. Catherine. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. Then I went to the garage, found a metal trash can, and burned it. Not out of anger or spite, but because holding on to her words meant holding on to the past. And the past was exactly what I'd left behind in Chicago. A year passed. The motorcycle shop thrived under our partnership, expanding to include a line of custom parts that attracted clients from across the western states. I expanded my social circle, made new friends in my running group and neighborhood, even went on a few dates, though nothing serious developed. The renovations on my house were finally complete, transforming it from a shelter into a home that reflected my tastes and needs rather than compromises with a partner. Marcus noticed the change in me as we closed up shop one Friday evening, the summer sun still high in the Colorado sky. "You're not running from ghosts anymore," he observed as we shared beers on the back deck behind the shop. "You've settled in." "No," I agreed, watching a red-tailed hawk circle above the nearby field, just running toward whatever's next. What was next arrived unexpectedly on a Tuesday afternoon in late September, nearly 14 months after I'd left Chicago. I was elbow deep in a vintage Harley engine when my phone rang. Jackson's name flashed on the screen, prompting a smile. We still talked regularly about business and life, maintaining the friendship despite the distance. "Catherine's here," he said without preamble, his voice tense with concern. My hand stilled on the greasy parts, heart stuttering briefly before resuming its normal rhythm. "What do you mean here?" "In Denver, at the shop, looking for you." The world tilted briefly, then righted itself as I processed this information. "Why?" "Didn't say. She looks different, thinner, sadder." Jackson's voice dropped lower. "Should I tell her where to find you?" I considered saying no, closing that door permanently. The divorce was final, the property divided, the legal ties severed. There was no practical reason to see her, to reopen wounds that had finally begun to heal cleanly. But curiosity won out, alongside a strange sense that our story deserved a better ending than her tearful pleas in a hotel room. "Give her the address. I'll be here until 6. She arrived an hour later, standing hesitantly at the entrance to second gear, scanning the busy shop floor with uncertain eyes. I spotted her immediately, though Jackson was right. She had changed. The confident, polished advertising executive I'd married had been replaced by someone more subdued. Her designer clothes exchanged for simple jeans and a sweater, her perfectly highlighted blonde hair now its natural sandy brown. Marcus raised an eyebrow in my direction, a silent question that needed no translation after a year of friendship. I nodded, wiping my hands on a shop rag as I approached her, noting the way she clutched her purse like a lifeline. "Catherine." She startled at my voice, then offered a tentative smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Alex, you look good." "Thanks." I kept my tone neutral, searching her face for clues about her unexpected visit. "What brings you to Denver?" She glanced around at the curious faces of my co-workers, mechanics who had heard fragments of my story over shared lunches and after-work beers. "Could we talk somewhere private?" I led her to my office, closing the door against the noise of the shop. She sat in the visitor's chair, hands folded in her lap with uncharacteristic stillness. "You've built something good here," she said, gesturing toward the shop floor, visible through the office window. "Jackson said business is booming." "It is, but I don't think you came all this way to discuss my business success." She took a deep breath, shoulders rising and falling beneath the simple blue sweater. "No, I came because I'm moving to Seattle next month. New job, new start." Her eyes met mine directly for the first time. I didn't want to leave the Midwest without seeing you one last time. Why? Closure, maybe. She looked down at her hands at the bare ring finger where my diamond had once rested. Or maybe I just needed to see for myself that you're okay. I'm okay, I confirmed, leaning against my desk rather than sitting behind it. Better than okay. She nodded, blinking back tears. I'm glad. You deserve that. She reached into her purse and withdrew a small package wrapped in tissue paper. I've been carrying this around for months, trying to decide whether to mail it or throw it away. Now I can just give it to you. I took it cautiously, unwrapping it to find my grandmother's sapphire ring, the one she'd returned to me the night I told her I was leaving Chicago. The blue stone gleamed under the office lights, unchanged despite everything that had happened since I'd last seen it. I kept thinking about this ring, she said quietly, how you saved it all those years, planning to give it to me, how I ruined that possibility before it even happened. Catherine, no, please let me finish. She straightened in her chair, gathering dignity around her like a cloak. I didn't come here asking for another chance. I know that's not possible. I came to apologize properly, face to face, and to tell you something I should have said a year ago. I waited, turning the ring over in my palm, feeling its weight, both physical and emotional. Thank you, she said simply, for not destroying me in the divorce when you could have, for being the better person when I gave you every reason not to be, and for showing me what real integrity looks like. She stood up, smoothing her jeans with trembling hands. That's all. I won't bother you again. As she turned to leave, hand reaching for the doorknob, I found myself saying, I hope Seattle is good to you. She paused, looking back with a sad smile that carried the weight of all our shared history. I hope so too. But if it's not, I'll be okay. That's one thing this whole mess taught me. I'm stronger than I thought. After she left, Marcus poked his head in, eyes curious but respectful. Everything all right? I was still staring at the sapphire ring, thinking about second chances and fresh starts, about how life rarely follows the paths we expect. Yeah, just ghosts from the past. Want to talk about it? I slipped the ring into my desk drawer. No, but I wouldn't mind that beer you promised me. He grinned, relief evident in his expression. Coming right up. That night I sat on my back deck, watching the stars emerge over the Denver skyline, brighter and more numerous than they'd ever appeared in Chicago. Catherine's visit had stirred up feelings I thought I'd buried. Not love or longing, but something more complex. Understanding, perhaps, or forgiveness. Not for her sake, but for mine. Carrying anger was exhausting, a weight I hadn't realized I was still bearing until it lifted. My phone buzzed with a text from Anna Mitchell, a veterinarian I'd met at a friend's barbecue the previous month. We'd gone out twice, enjoyable evenings that had ended with polite goodnight kisses and promises to do it again soon. Still on for Saturday? Her message read, simple and direct, much like Anna herself. I found myself smiling as I typed my reply. Absolutely. Looking forward to it. The past was finally where it belonged. Behind me, a closed chapter rather than an open wound. The future, with all its uncertainty and possibility, lay ahead like the Colorado mountains at sunrise. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to embrace it without reservation or fear. Life goes on. Sometimes it even gets better. If you like this story, please click the hype button. This video deserves to be popular. Have a nice rest.